Hello and welcome. Today I'm here with Sherview from Shinies and Lucydos, and today we're going to be talking about ley lines. How are you today, Sherview?
Hello, I'm doing very well, Ash. How are you?
I'm good. So this topic about ley lines is, well, I know you know how important it is, and I know how you also know how big it is. So I figure we'll try and go with like a who, what, when, why type structure for this, as in we'll go with like what are ley lines and kind of go into the whys, like where are they, kind of like go with that, just to try and keep this subject kind of coherent. You okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Alright, cool. So, to start off, what do you think ley lines are, or more like what are they and why do you think they are important?
Well, they seem to be connected to the lifeblood of the planet in some capacity. They seem to be connected to mana, and they're kind of like almost the veins or the energy streams of the arcane around the planet. Something to that effect. They're important because they seem to indicate or have something to do with the health of the planet, but it seems like they also have something to do with the structure of the universe potentially, or like the way that time and place seems to work, like teleportation magic and things like that seems to rely on the ley lines.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and well, that's more the why. So I guess the question will go with more the more real questions, like what do you think they are? Like, what do you think they are to the universe? Because I have an answer for this, but just want to check with you first if you've got any ideas.
Well, to me, it's really hard to say because we don't know much about them in that capacity. But the impression that I'm getting, just based off what we do know, it seems like it's directly connected to Azeroth. And I think that maybe the extent of Azeroth's ley lines maybe is the extent of like her not her form, but like her influence, I guess.
Kind of like her power?
I guess. More
Okay.
like what she affects.
Ah, okay. Well, for me, ley lines from research I've done, they are, well, how do I describe this? They are a fundamental, no, not fundamental source, well they are a fundamental source, but it's more like they're raw magic. And when I say like raw magic, I mean like not just arcane, I mean like all magic, right? That's the first kind of thing of what they are. But on top of that, as you mentioned with portals, it seems as if portals, and to a larger extent, which I'll probably have to explain, dimensions and all that, kind of specifically relate to ley lines. And I think they're kind of, well, that combined as an extremely potent and like origin of the universe type power source, as well as the basis for pretty much all portal magic in World of Warcraft, and the kind of stretches you can do to that theory are actually kind of surprising, because if it is as versatile as I think it is, it explains a surprising amount.
Yeah, I think that when the universe was first forged, all the magic was volatile and it would erupt into bursts of flame and cataclysmic like maelstroms of fire, and as you would expect a primordial planet with all these like volcanoes and storms, like it was just a big magic storm in the entire universe, right? And I think that in order to have such an ordered and chaos free version of the Great Dark, I think the magic has been contained into these ley lines, and it has the same kind of function as the fabric of reality, how you would imagine. It's like there's boundaries set up, and there's like power lines, if you will, that go throughout, which would be the ley lines, rather than it just being all free floating and colliding and exploding.
I completely agree with that, and actually I've ever since like you've mentioned that in relation to like the theory you had a while ago about twisting Nether and all that, I've kind of done my own research, and I kind of found an analogy I think that works. And just skipping out of WoW for like a few seconds, have you ever played Magic the Gathering?
Like twice. I don't know much about it.
Well, I'll be honest, I've never played it before, and, well, yeah, I found the lore rather enlightening when it comes to World of Warcraft, because the basis behind the cosmology of Magic is basically there are planes and then there's the blind eternities, and the way it's basically described is that planes are pocket dimensions / miniature universes basically, and blind eternities is the space in between, which is basically described as being basically raw energy that's chaotic, mana, energy, just all that type of stuff. Magic in a nutshell, right? And I found that translated really well to WoW, and it kind of gave me like 3 possibilities on how the universe kind of works. The first one is that World of Warcraft is very similar, and if not identical, to Magic. And basically what we have is a whole bunch of dimensions, pocket dimensions, realms, the list goes on, that all sit in different spots, and what's between all of them is ley lines and like the ley line energies. Hence why portals and all that kind of work to connect them, right? The second option, which relates to a theory you came up with, was the idea that we have, well yeah, once again, all these pocket dimensions, realms, whatnot, in different places, but what's between them is the twisting Nether. And that seems, at least from this theory, seems to be like the more tangible reason. However, the other and with that theory as well, the idea is that where the twisting Nether sits between everything, the way you actually get to different like planes / realms in regards to World of Warcraft is you need the ley lines to do so, and you have to kind of like create portals through these ley lines. The third option, which is more, well, the one I want to happen, just because it kind of opens up more possibilities and interesting things, but basically goes with the idea that, yes, once again, there are a whole bunch of planes, and there is the space in between them. However, the space in between them is split between the Great Dark Beyond and the Twisting Nether. And so what you basically have is like one realm that's more related to chaos, the light, and simply life with the Twisting Nether, and then you have one that's more ordered, dark, and related to simply death for whatever reason in regards to the Great Dark Beyond. They're like the 3-ish options of, oh you're right, and the idea is that once again ley lines are required to like travel between these 2 different spaces between everything, but also to travel between like different planes and dimensions in general.
Right, so question. If this is the medium to where you can travel between, do you think that the Twisting Nether is connected to its parallel reality through these ley lines, and therefore, like, do you think there's some kind of cycle or symbiosis or like ecosystem between the two where the fuel of the ley lines maybe like is influenced by the Nether, or like maybe it's charged by the Nether, or maybe it depletes at the Nether or something like that, like I don't know, like power lines, I guess, the Nether being the battery, or Azeroth being like the battery, I don't know.
Yes, I do agree with that, with the third theory, and the idea that they have a symbiosis. Why it comes back to that same theory you had a while ago, where you mentioned the idea that the beginnings of the universe seem to imply that there was something there before, as in, you know, there was this explosion, but it's kind of iffy on whether there was just nothingness or whether there was something else there. And the impression I get, right, is that the Great Dark Beyond and Twisting Nether, and the idea that the space in between but separated, has something specifically to do with the creation, or with the explosion the light and void caused. And the idea is that basically, how do I put it? The light and the void initially had a battlefield, right? As in they interacted with each other, but then the explosion happened. And what ensued was basically Twisting Nether, the universe as we know it, but mainly the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark Beyond. And what I think would be a very bad situation, because the battlefield would be kind of created again, would be the idea that if the void or the light managed to merge the Twisty Nether and the Great Dark Beyond again, you'd kind of have that battlefield once more, like the battlefield they actually fought over, which initially caused that explosion. So that's kind of how I think they're related. I think they're kind of two parts of what originally was there, but thanks to Light and the Void and their lovely misunderstanding of each other, they kind of separated them, which was kind of a good thing. They kind of stopped the war, kind of like as the references go in regards to the Light and Void's been at this for a while. I think the problem would be if they ever merge again, we kind of have that situation of, oh, the war of light and darkness kind of once again exists. Might have rambled there a bit, sorry.
Well, that's okay. I definitely think the ley lines were created at that point. So let's say you have like a nascent universe. You know, the Big Bang has just happened. Light has shot out. The void like coalesced while in the pockets where the light faded. And everything is this huge maelstrom of magic and fire because the two magics interacting and causing explosions and whatever. So at what point did the ley lines come into being? Like, I almost wonder if the first Titans who were made actually did exist in this maelstrom of fire. Like, maybe Aman'Thul would have been born before, or like at the same time as the Great Dark, or like before the Great Dark potentially. And him being time, I wonder if he created, or maybe his first planet had something to do with how the ley lines came to be.
Where the ley lines come into this is actually kind of, it's kind of an obscure idea, because you know how there are still remnants of the original void, apparently, right? As in that still exists, but we still have very little understanding or knowledge of the original light and what that was, as in we have the holy light that, you know, wants to heal and whatnot, but it can't have been the original light, considering we have, you know, life magic, which obviously had to have something to do with the creation of everything and whatnot. When it comes to the ley lines, I think they might, for whatever reason, be the original light, as in they are the combination of everything and like the remnants of what that light was. Hence why I think in, it's BC, I think it's Archmage Vargoth in his journal, as in the out of sync mage you find in Netherstorm, his journal. He mentions the idea that ley lines relate to the genesis of planets, or he mentions the idea that when it comes to Azeroth and Draenor, they have very similar ley lines, hence their genesis is very similar. The implication there is like, oh, they actually have similar genesis because of ley lines, or ley lines relate to the genesis of a planet.
Right. And isn't it noted, like Aggramar thought it was weird how there was no Titan on Draenor because of the presence of ley lines, and no Titan was weird. Like, it makes you wonder, in every single planet that has a world soul, is there ley lines? I mean, I would say probably, because it almost seems like they have to be hooked up to this power source.
I think, and that's the thing though, I think it's more like, how do I put it? Every world has ley lines, or most of them do, right? As hence why life sprouts. But when it comes to Titans and the idea of them in general, it's that their souls or their beings are so powerful that they can somehow manipulate the ley lines in general. Or at least, yeah, they draw on the ley lines to the point of where it's like, if there's a massive coalition of ley lines, I can use my words, there's most likely going to be a Titan. Hence why, yeah, he found it odd. Or at least that's my impression.
Yeah, I guess probably another way of looking at it is like some of the ingredients needed for there to be a sentient planet maybe involve, okay, so there has to be this big hunk of mass, which is, made of the elements, that is the planet. Then you need shards of light to actually hit this thing. And usually these shards of light just turn into elemental spirits, but you need so much light to hit this planet that, we've seen that not only does it create elemental spirits, it's like these huge elemental lords that are warring over the place. And inside of it, you get this world soul. But, I get the impression that I guess the difference really is just the amount of light that hits it. I feel like it just got so much light into it that it became sentient or something.
No, you're right, and that would probably explain a lot, as in it's kind of like you said, it's like an ingredient thing, as in you need the planet to begin with, then you need the ley lines for the power source, then, you actually have to have the light, all these, what were they called? What was it? It's like the Naru were shards, and the Titans were, but yeah, you're right. The light just generally needs to hit these planets for them to actually start gaining sentience. But as you kind of mentioned as well, something has to kind of interfere and mature with them, because the elemental lords, 9 times out of 10, wouldn't allow a Titan soul to form just because of the way they are.
Well, how they actually describe it is clouds of fractured light that became both the Naru and the Titans. And it is interesting because when you think of how a world soul looks with all the little stars, and it kind of is this little cloud or this little, right? And it has all these constellations in it. It almost seems like these little constellations are stars. If you take one fractured shard of light and it makes an elemental spirit, then maybe for a world soul you just need so many little fragments, and then they all need to link up to make that constellation.
Yeah, that would actually make a lot of sense. And actually, now that you've mentioned the idea of Titans being constellations, this question I'm about to ask you is kind of what led me on to why ley lines are kind of so important, or how it kind of clicked in my head. The question I'll put to you is, right, Titans are constellations, we know this, right? However, Azeroth, as we also know, is a planet. So the question I kind of ask you is, how does a constellation, right, a group of stars, that's the definition of constellation, right, end up inside a planet? Spatially, that doesn't make sense. So, do you have any ideas of how that would work?
Well, I don't know. I'm not very good at science, but it reminds me of how atoms work and how a molecular structure works. I feel like there's something there where if you understood science on a better level than me, Blizzard might have gone that deep to where it was inspired by that.
Okay. Never thought about it like that. If I did, I might have never gone with... Huh. Okay. Because, the way I went with it, right, was, we know there are certain places in World of Warcraft that spatially make absolutely no sense, right? As in, it's like the TARDIS thing, what is it, bigger on the inside? There are places like that in World of Warcraft, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, so I basically just started looking for them, and three places that were in vanilla, these places are old, came to mind. They were Maraudon, Caverns of Time, and Karazhan. And what was interesting was that Maraudon and Caverns of Time have, pretty much no explanation behind the real fundamentals why. As in, okay, Maraudon was created by Elemental Princess, whose name I cannot remember. And Caverns of Time was it's occupied by the Bronze Dragons, and it's probably the best example of why is there a, new sky inside a cave, right? The interesting thing is, when you go to Karazhan, you realize that it actually has the most explanation behind this phenomenon of being, bigger on the inside. As in, pretty much everything except for, the original reason for why Karazhan was important has been explained.
this is kind of a side note, but I would kind of hope that Blizzard actually does explain like what, like how a world soul works and what it's made of, like what's going on with these constellations, like the star magic type stuff that the Titans use. I mean, even in the Argus fight, Aman'Thul uses this like celestial kind of magic. We have the constellars that we don't understand. I like there's so much there that hasn't been explained. And I'm sure that they actually do have a reason. Like, I'm sure Blizzard has it figured out. It's just not.
It's a slow burn, to say the least. And they're just leaving little breadcrumbs for us to try and, like, figure it all out. But in the meantime, you get to speculate in general about it.
And then you have Medivh and Karazhan, and I feel like those. I don't know why, what the heck is his name? Antonidas was so gifted the way he was, but he was clearly looking into arcane and time and like the fabric of reality. Like, I feel like he was actually like this huge astronomer guy who was like trying to understand like the universe as it is. And with what Egwene eventually was able to accomplish, what Medivh is able to accomplish, I mean, what he was doing in Karazhan with Khadgar is like on one level, but I feel like now that he's gone off and he's apparently like still partially exists in the Nether because he has the soul of Sargeras, or for whatever reason, like, you know, he's flying around the Nether or whatnot. He probably is trying to understand all of that, like on a even greater like level than Illidan was trying to understand how all that worked.
I'd agree with that. And so, I hope I don't end up rambling this next explanation about what I was going on about before, but this will hopefully make sense in regards to what you're talking about. Because the reason why I think, well, the arcane specifically is so important for astronomy and just looking into it, and all this talk of poor magic as well, is that when it comes to Karazhan, right, we know Karazhan sits on a ley line, and ironically enough, we know that, what was it? All ley lines prior to, I think, the Nexus War actually flowed to Karazhan, and I'm pretty sure that was because of the Deadwind Harvester, which I'll probably end up mentioning later thinking about it, but anyway. When it comes to ley lines, right, we know Karazhan is sitting on a massive one, right? And the interesting thing about Karazhan, though, is that the major thing about it is that it has the library, as in the library of Karazhan is probably its most impressive feature. Yet the question kind of becomes, okay, so what is the library of Karazhan? And I guess the first assumption I'd make is, like, it's a pocket dimension. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Right. So, it's a pocket dimension. The question is, okay, so how in the world did Medivh / Egwene just, I think, actually no, it was Egwene actually, but how did they manage to, like, maintain this pocket dimension when the only other kind of creatures we've known to do that type of magic relate to Sargeras with Mardoom and the elemental plane when it came to Ra, who specifically mimicked Sargeras. So who can say?
Well, I have a feeling you have an answer to your own question already, but I want to suggest, like, wasn't it the story that when Egwene created Karazhan, she was in some kind of fit of rage? So I almost wonder if her own power was just so, like, out of control that what if she never even intended to do it?
Actually, that... Ooh. Okay. I'll explain this next part, but just remember that idea, because there's something that this might actually connect to later on. Oh yeah, that's good. But,
okay.
What I was going on about, right, though, is like, so yeah, Karazhan sits on a ley line, it has this pocket dimension, the library is sitting there, but the kind of question becomes, like, what is it, right? And kind of, well, how do I put it? Kind of clicked for me after reading, what's the book called? Beginner's Guide to Dimensional Rifting. It's a book you can pick up in the Zuna that does, well, basically explains how portal magic works in regards to mages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what part of the book it was. I'll probably end up looking it up during this, but part of the book basically implies the idea that when a mage creates a portal, it's not like a teleportation spell where it's like well, yeah, kind of like what Jaina does with her magic in Lordaeron. It's not like a teleportation spell. It's more like a well, it's more like a wormhole, basically, where it's like you have to enter in, you have to walk through something, or you have to travel through something, then you have to step out the other side, right? And it kind of clicked because the underlining, or one of the other underlining themes of Legion was ley lines, was the idea it's like, hold on, what if, well, for whatever strange reason, what if Karazhan is a just a long-lasting portal? Like, and kind of explain that, right? When we go into the library, we enter through one entrance of the portal, right? It's a big swirly, we walk in, right? Then, as we exit at the chessboard, we're exited out another swirly, which, and you know, we come out into Legion Fleet at a different space, different kind of like place in time and space, right? So the assumption I'm going with is like, it's like, okay, so the library itself then is basically a long-lasting portal that just has a lot of stuff in it. And where it kind of sounds crazy, the interesting thing is that we kind of have evidence that this kind of stuff can occur, because 8.2 really hammers home this idea with our fight with Phil Jaden. Because we kind of enter through the portal, we fight him, you know, as we travel to Argus through the portal, and then we exit the portal at Argus. So the idea is that portal magic fundamentally has, well, two aspects. An entrance, like entrances, and the tunnel. And the concept that kind of like blew my mind when it came to this was, what happens if you like close both entrances but leave the tunnel open? And the answer I kind of came to was, oh, you have a prison slash, you know, kind of have something that kind of gets people stuck in certain places. And so the idea I kind of came up with was, oh yeah, so that's possibly how portal, no, not portal magic. What is portal magic? What I mean is that's possibly how pocket dimensions are created.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because the whole word pocket dimension, it's in between dimensions, so it's in between point A and point B.
And this is where things cut. Well, I mean, this is where this idea becomes like ridiculously potent, because, okay, let's go for, what's the best example? Okay, yeah, elemental planes. Elemental planes, up until I think maybe Chronicle Volume 1, were described as pocket dimensions or something along those lines, right? Then we got Chronicle Volume 1, which basically went out of its way to say Ra created the elemental planes in a similar fashion to Sargeras, as in when Sargeras created Mardoom, he tried to mimic that. And the thing about Mardoom that we like 100% know is that A, it was prison for demons, as in like he was a plane of banishment, and assumably a pocket dimension. 2, we know Sargeras cleaved it in 2, which is just like a feat in itself. And 3, we know it was specifically made out of the energies of the twisting Nether. And so you know how at the start I said like what I think ley lines are, and the second option with the idea of twisting Nether being between everything, right? The implication I kind of got from this was, oh, ley line energies are quote-unquote the energies of the twisting Nether, and previous pocket dimensions that have been created, aka Elemental Plane, aka Mardoom, have been created out of these same energies, as have been created out of ley line energies. Oh, right. And the reason why these are all so diverse, right, also kind of comes back to the whole idea of the implication of ley lines having no specific magic that's related to them, as in like they're just raw magical energy that relates to not only elemental magic, but also like, you know, life, death, arcane, chaos, light, void, all that type of stuff. And it kind of fits with the description of the Twisted Nether that was provided in Chronicle Volume 1, because Chronicle Volume 1, if I'm not mistaken, it basically just implies that Twisted Nether is a melding pot for all energy in the universe, as in the chaotic energies of the light and the void that create the universe just coalesce in Twisted Nether in complete chaos. Meaning there's technically no set magic for the Twisted Nether, it just happens to have demons which relate to Fel because the place is just chaotic, or naturally chaotic.
Yeah. It's both light and void, so I feel like the natural state or the first state of the universe is basically just the Nether. And naturally some of it burns out, so then you've got the void. But the light, I don't think it necessarily like happens naturally. It's just the desire of the light to proliferate and to grow and to do their own thing, and like they have such a goal that they create the pocket. Like I feel like the fabric of reality that makes the Great Dark this like crystal sphere, or however you want to look at it. I feel like the light created that for themselves, and they don't let the void in. And these pocket dimensions are made out of the same fabric that they use to create their own big pocket dimension. Like in a way, the Great Dark is kind of just a giant pocket.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the implication, right? As in, it's kind of not only pocket dimensions, but it's kind of also realms, dimensions as a whole. Just, as I said, this is why I keep saying this theory is like potent. It's the idea that the versatility, or like the kind of explanations that kind of come from it, are kind of scary, because, as you were just saying, this kind of implies that, yeah, dimensions as a whole sit within these kind of energies, right?
So would you say that like the Great Dark, if the Great Dark is a backpack, right? And inside the large pocket of the backpack, there's like these little like hidden pockets, like, you know, to put your change and your passport, whatever. Like those are like the pocket dimensions. They're like they're like made of the overall fabric, but it's just like, we're just gonna tear this open a little bit and then just like seal it back up.
That is actually a very, very good explanation. That's a good analogy. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's basically, yeah, what I'm trying to get at, and I would completely agree with that. So yeah, that's I guess what ley lines are. Would you agree? Have we kind of missed? Oh, right. What you mentioned before. Okay. So you know how you mentioned
Egg.
Yeah, no, like the idea of her being angry, right, and creating just Karazhan, right? Now, where I'm not sure that may have happened, the concept, I think, is actually more accurate than you'd believe, because you know how I'm basically saying, all dimensions relate to these energies, right, or these little pockets within the backpack, right? Think about the Emerald Dream, right, and the idea of how Azeroth, being just such a powerful entity, created her own pocket dimension, which is basically just her dreams, right? Or like, this is what Azeroth's dreams are, and they manifest because, you know, tear a hole in the pocket, kind of gets out, and oh, well, now you have life in some form or another from Azeroth's dream. What's interesting is that, you know how N'Zoth keeps going on about how he's dreamed our future, how he keeps going on, it's like he's trying to bring something to the physical universe, but you can't really figure out what. Well, it just kind of crossed my mind a while ago that it's like, what if N'Zoth is basically got his own equivalent of the Emerald Dream, right? And the idea is that, his own equivalent of the Emerald Dream, but not only is it like just the Emerald Dream, but it's like an Emerald Dream that has a past, present, and future. And what he's trying to do, right, is like bring that into reality. Hence why he would be able to predict the future, but also know the past, like, perfectly. If that makes any sense.
I'm just thinking about...
I guess, like, the main point of that, minus the kind of crazy stuff towards the end is the idea that creatures, depending on how powerful they are, can end up influencing or just creating their own pocket dimensions within their own dreams.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems, I mean, we already know through how the Natharzim react, if there's too much of a magical force in one area, then it starts to tear the fabric of reality without the people even knowing. And that can cause the Nether to leak in, that can cause it to, like, I don't even know, like, it compromises the structure of the world itself.
And warps the denizens within it as well.
Yeah, because it's like their protective shield, the ozone layer, they're putting a whole...
Actually, now that you mentioned Natharzim, that brings up another point this theory might explain, right? Because, well, you know Deadwind Harvester, right? Like I mentioned it before. Do you know a lot about the lore behind it?
Well, I mean, I did the quest. You've talked to me about it in the past, but it's not something that I've taken, like, particular interest in, so I don't really remember that much. But I'm sure if you explained it a bit, I'd remember.
Okay. So, main point I'm looking at with Deadwind Harvester here is the idea of what it was forged out of, because I forget the name than the Deadwind Harvester part, but it's named after the first Dreadlord that Sargeras imprisoned, or the Dreadlord that refused to kneel to Sargeras when he made the offer of following him or dying and, you know, scorching the universe, etc., etc. But the interesting about that whole situation was that in the descriptions it mentions that the Deadwind Harvester was forged out of the fires of Mardoom. You know how we're kind of established now that Mardoom was a pocket dimension that Sargeras cleaved?
Mm-hmm.
The implication I'm getting from that is that, he forged the Deadwind Harvester out of what could equate to, I guess, quote-unquote, Ley Line energies that were, you know, corrupted thanks to the nightmarish conditions of Mardoom at the time, but the idea is still the same. He used Ley Line energies to create the Deadwind Harvester. But not only that, right, he started storing souls within it. As in just soul after soul after soul, and, like, the stories surrounding the Deadwind Harvester all relate to this idea that it just kept on gathering more and more power. But what's I found interesting was this underlining tone within it, and this idea that its power was infinite, as in comparison to other weapons it was like, its true power is not truly revealed yet, etc., etc. And kind of culminated in the eventual creation of, like, Deadwind Pass, because what's interesting there is because, as I mentioned, all ley lines ran to Karazhan prior to the Nexus War, and I'm pretty sure that was because the Deadwind Harvester was siphoning the ley line energy. I think that's kind of like where the connection I kind of made was, as in the things forged out of ley line energy. And I'm sorry if I keep going on about these subjects. This is just like one of the few things I really, really enjoy.
No, this is really cool. I just, I haven't read up a lot about that time period, about the creation of Karazhan, the Nexus War. Like, that's just something I need to learn more about. But you're definitely sound on the money with, you know, putting these things.
Okay, cool. As long as I'm not, like, going on for too long, then you're okay to listen in. Okay, cool. So, this Deadwind Harvester is created out of ley line energy. It seems like it can draw ley line energy from a planet, so much so, and it was doing it for so long that it redirected all the ley lines on Azeroth to Karazhan, right? And the only way, well, how do I put it? When it comes to Nexus War and the way, like, the Blue Dragons redirected ley lines, they had to use Surge Needles, and, like, the only Surge Needle we see is massive, as in, like, the size of at least the size of one mage tower, and usually floats, yeah, it's big, let's just say that, right? So this weapon has that much power, but what's kind of, like, really put this into perspective of me, and this whole underlying thing about the Deadwind Harvester, right, is going back to this dimensional guide, beginner's guide to dimensional rifting. It mentions in this book, I forget which chapter again, but it's in there, that when creating portals and, you know, going through ley lines, you have to be very careful because fundamentally you can't fundamentally the physical universe is not like the Emerald Dream where everything stays still. Like, time progresses, everything kind of decays, whatnot. So for example, you know, you can't create a portal in one place and expect it to stay, that place to stay the same forever. That kind of concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just like clicked that, well, what if, just for whatever reason, right, or not for whatever reason, what if someone took that concept, right, and stuck to that concept of portals having to, well, you know, turn up on different locations, or they kind of have to like be on stable ground, right, and just stuck a portal entrance on a weapon, and then, you know, created a pocket dimension within that weapon, right, within the energies of that weapon, and then start to fill that weapon with energy, souls, and whatnot. And that's kind of where it's like, oh, could that be what the Deadwind Harvester is?
And
but then on top of that, kind of... Sorry, what?
Frostmourne too. I mean, the Harvester could have been the first one, maybe. Especially if it was named after the first Natharzim. It could explain, like, one of the fundamental aspects of Natharzim technology. Because it's always Natharzim stuff that are like...
Yeah, that's it, because I think you mentioned it, that Natharzim have a very... Hold on. Most of the talking weapons, well, mostly... Oh, yeah. They create weapons that are completely, like, insanely devastating, but another thing that they seem to do is just create weapons that talk. Like this idea that they, or absorb things. So you've got Frostmourne, Deadwind Harvester. Can you think of any others off the top of my head that relate to Natharzim that are similar?
Not that talk, but like the Death Knight one, what's it called? I wanted to say Maw of Souls, but I don't think that's right.
Yeah,
there's a Death Knight one that is forged by some Durani on Argus or something. I could be totally wrong. And it's made out of like the Nihilum metal, right? That like sucks souls out. But that's like the same kind of concept. It would just be a lesser version of like what would have been in Mardoom. Mardoom, obviously, I feel like it's some kind of super concentrated fel, like void fel, that is so pure that like we would never be able to get that again. Because like just the amount of demons that would have been in it. Like if you're thinking about a world soul and you're thinking about a planet, and the planet has all these creatures and these life forms in it, and these creatures live and die, and you know it's got like there's all these souls that are going into the earth, and it's just this ball of souls. I mean, that's basically what Sargeras did without even trying to, except they're all demon souls. He just put them all in this one thing. So you can just imagine like this crazy power that like what would even have come of it? Like the more condensed it became, like this realm of Mardoom that he created is like a whole other thing in and of itself.
You're right. And I guess this is kind of where Natharzim weapons and the idea comes in, because if they're, say, you know, talking weapons / weapons that absorb just energy, right? If they're all like, I don't know, they've all got their own miniature pocket dimensions in them, right? And they start to just consistently absorb energy, become stronger and stronger, you start to understand why these weapons are so damn powerful, because they start to
yeah, exactly.
Right? And the scary thing is, like, it's like, okay, so what weapons do we have out there that still, like, explains pretty much all the legendary weapons from Legion and why they're all able to absorb the energies of the sword, right? As in, they've all got their own pocket dimensions, and assumedly absorbing the energies of that sword, a sword that can break pocket dimensions, probably weakened the weapons overall, right? But the interesting thing is, right, it's like, or we take Xalatat, for example, which is like, you know, staple weapon at the moment in regards to current lore. Kind of implies that it's like, okay, or kind of reinforces actually the idea that, okay, A, it's very powerful, B, it's definitely a prison, but it kind of opens up the possibility of like, okay, how much power can this thing store? Because it doesn't seem like we've actually seen its full power yet.
Yeah, I get the impression all these weapons can store like an immense amount, and I think an immense amount is required in order to make them. With these like she says things like how she was using some great sacrifice. I don't feel like this is just, the casual like blood sacrifice, like I'm just gonna, get a bunch of trolls together from this tribe, like this enemy tribe that we've enslaved, and kill them. Like I feel like it was some like massive levels of souls going into this pocket dimension to get that kind of power, because I feel like it has to mimic what happened in Mardoom to a degree, not anywhere near as closely, but I think it was the Maw of the Damned, I think is what the Death Knight weapon is called. But basically, like, the Titans were fighting close to Nihilum, and when Sargeras kills all the Titans and Norganon manages to, like, weave their souls away through his, like, dream weaving or whatever, it's this fight of killing all these Titans. That's what like completely warps and destroys Nihilum and turns it into this like metal that sucks souls. And I think it's like the exact same concept. It's like all of this condensed power in this tiny space.
Right, and that would make perfect sense. And now you mentioned it, this actually explains why it's called the Dream Weaver. Because you just kind of clicked with what when you just said that, because it's like reality warping stuff, etc., right? That usually relates to arcane magic. But what we've kind of gone on about is the idea that if a creature's powerful enough, right, their very dreams will warp the universe around them. So, hence the name Dream Weaver, as in it's one in the same thing, basically, depending on the power scale.
Yeah, I think that's kind of sad. I mean, this is a totally off topic, but I think that might be why the dream is so permanent. Like Azeroth's dream, there was some blueprint about it, and it's a immutable state. Like not even Ysera can affect change permanently on the dream. It'll always drift back to like its state, and that in and itself seems wrong. Like it seems against nature. It seems like maybe Norganon's dream weaving mixed with the fact that these titans are in this like sleep, it makes you think that the dream was frozen by the Pantheon, or however this original Great Dark was created. All these titans supposedly were all asleep in the Great Dark and like woke up one at a time. I think like in order to create this big pocket dimension that is the Great Dark, the big crystal sphere, like all the dreams had to be frozen because they couldn't, like, just the very nature of them like affecting all this change wouldn't have worked. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, no, you're right. And that does just, it raises a lot of questions about the origins of the universe as a whole. And then again, it also raises the question about the Shadowlands as well. As in, like, assumedly that's another pocket dimension as well, but, like, as you said, it's just, good questions to ask. Bit off topic, this next one. Or it's kind of off topic for what we've just been talking about, still kind of on topic. With everything we've just said, do you think this explains where the old gods are? As in, do you think they are in pocket dimensions that were created by the Keepers? Or do you think they're in different locations completely? As in, not pocket dimensions, but they've just literally shunted them into different dimensions completely?
Yes. I think they are probably in pocket dimensions because it kind of removes them from physically being able to like affect reality, and the whole goal of the Void Lords was for them to manifest into reality. Like maybe removing them by a degree from reality like hampered their power. I think that would make a lot of sense. but knowing what we know about pocket dimensions and how imperfect and volatile they are, and how like the shield around them, like the ozone layer, can just get a hole in it. I mean, it's not surprising that these prisons keep breaking and stuff. I mean, what were they? I mean, I get the Titans' idea of putting them into this prison the same way they did Margin, the same way they did the elemental planes, but it never works. Like, it's not a permanent solution. Like they've never managed to just lock things up and just stuff them into a little fold in the fabric and it to just like stay. And the scary part about that fact is that, like, by that logic, the Great Dark itself is just as weak, like, and that it can just like burst.
You're absolutely correct. And thinking about it, it explains, it implies / also kind of explains why the world trees were so, well, important, or at least why Androsel specifically was so, I guess, detrimental in regards to the Titans' prison, what's the word? Prison attempts, because it seems, at least with Androsel at the very least, it somehow touched that pocket dimension, and so assumedly because the world trees, actually no, we know this from Draenor, plants or life in World of Warcraft absorb everything, as in they will just take whatever energy they can find and use that to grow. See that with the Everbloom, right? But when it comes to the world trees, if I was to guess, or Androsel specifically, it ended up touching, it went into the ley lines, and that started drawing energy because it was just so big. However, its roots eventually touched Jogsaron's prison, as in touched that pocket dimension, and it was probably his way out. Because you know how the druids use dreamway portals and the trees specifically to get into the Emerald Dream?
Mm-hmm.
I figure the idea would be that's how that kind of escape happened for the old gods, specifically through the trees, or trying, well, yeah, Vordrasil specifically, but yeah, specifically trying to use the trees.
For sure. I mean, I know this is a long-standing idea. It's not like something new by any means, but Akalon just came out with a video like yesterday about that. Not that it's like, I'm not trying to say like he is introducing new concepts necessarily, but yeah, he was just trying to explain to his audience that, like, yeah, by the way, the trees are how the old gods got into the dream. Like,
oh, there you go, watch that. But yeah, well, what I find interesting though, right, is that well, okay, how would I put it? Druids have portals, mages have portals, and, well, we find out in Legion, Shamans have portal, thanks to Magatha Grim Totem, which kind of like chastises the player for not knowing how to do this. So it just makes me wonder how elemental magic relates to this type of stuff. Because I know the elemental, because I am fairly certain, like 100% certain, the elemental plane is a pocket dimension, except, just a complexly made pocket dimension.
Okay, I kind of want to stop you there because I'm happy you brought this up because this is a whole other like can of worms for me. Because like the way that we imagine pocket dimensions in like how you described it, like the wormhole between the nether and reality, and like the pocket dimension in the fabric, the pocket dimension between like spaces, that's one thing. But I almost feel like there's a second part to it. I feel like Karazhan itself is a perfect example of the type of timey-wimey nether reality kind of pocket dimension. But, and the dream is another good example of that to a degree, because like everything, like time functions differently there. Everything is weird. Everything is illusionary. It's not really that ordered. You can like feel how the nether is like affecting it. The elemental planes is not that way. There isn't like all of this nether timey-wimey like demonic like aspect to it. And we know that everything is made out of the fabric of reality and the ley lines and that, in terms of the crystal sphere, in terms of the dimension and the pocket, but everything that's actually physical in the physical universe is made out of matter. It's made out of the elements. And a planet itself, in a way, is like a different form of pocket. Like, it's not a pocket dimension, but it's like it's a realm. It has its own atmosphere. It's a world, and inside of the shell of the planet, there's a world soul living in there. There's some kind of like energy and souls and connection to the ley lines. Like, you can view it as a different type of pocket. And I wonder if like the elemental planes are not the same kind of pockets to where they're in some... I don't think the elemental planes are necessarily in the space between reality and the nether. I think they might actually be made out of matter. Like, they're not... It's hard to explain because they're not in the physical universe in that sense, but they're not 100% like spiritual either. Like, fire, it is matter, like in and of itself. If you're gonna shove all of this matter into a pocket dimension that's outside of reality, but this is literally the materials of the physical universe, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there has to be a whole other level of what they made. Like, I think that the stuff Helia made, the pocket dimensions for the elemental planes, is like an even more complicated type of pocket dimension that might actually be weaker than the type that's out in the nether, because it makes it more grounded to reality.
I can definitely see where you're going with that. I mean, I'll admit, I'm the complete opposite to you in this regard about the subject. I'm just sticking with the more simplistic way, because the assumption I made with the elemental plane, right, was that it's, well, similar to Mardoom, right, as in its pocket dimension, except instead of having demons thrown into it, you have elementals thrown into it, and, you know, just that whole type of situation. But now that you mentioned that it's possibly weaker, am I actually, or just like weaker and fundamentally different, that would explain the Cataclysm in general, and why specifically the elements were free during the Cataclysm. Because, okay, I mean, immediately he erupted from Deepholm, but sorry about the noise. Really, he did erupt from Deepholm, but still.
Well, it didn't shatter all the pocket dimensions. It specifically shattered the elemental pocket dimensions. Why? Like, I feel like they are all separate for a reason. They constantly fight. They're chaotic when they're together. And when you segregate all of the elementals, then they're not going to fight amongst themselves. They don't have anybody else to fight. So it puts them in this more like, not like ordered state, I guess, or less volatile, or it doesn't give them the opportunity to break open. I think if you did get a pocket dimension and you put like fire elementals and earth elementals in there, then they would just like fight until the thing ruptured. It wouldn't work.
Well, that's actually an interesting point you bring up, because we know they do fight each other. We know that thanks to what was it? 7 point pun?
Oh, I said Smolderon. I meant that there is a little, but I don't think it's to that degree. And when the fire elementals fight each other for like dominance or whatever, it's not gonna, there's no chemical reaction happening that like what would happen with Fel and Arcane, or with like the different elements colliding and creating new things.
Okay.
I think a big portion of like how this all works is that the planes are separated by elements.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. And, well, makes you wonder if the Titans have something equivalent to Elementium that they use to create the elemental plane out of, thinking about it.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, you've seen Odin's Halls of Valor, and everything is gold. I believe that's in Skywall. Like, I feel like, I don't think they use Elementium. I feel like Elementium is an old god thing. I think the Titans version of it is gold.
Actually, yeah, that would make a lot of sense, since, you know, it's not going to be called gold. Oh, actually, might have been Azerite. The reason why I'm mentioning that is because, where do you see it? You see it in at the start of BFA. There's an earthen right next to Magni, and his colouring's changing, as in it's going from the standard blue that you see throughout Aldalar, and it starts to go gold. The implication is that it's Azerite. We also see the same thing with Galip's staffs at the very beginning of BFA as well. The prelude to BFA at the very least. But you see his like red orb change gold, and it turns out it's Azerite. So it's making me think if, well, similar to Elementium actually, that they, well, just smithed it in different ways. Because the thing about Elementium, which I'm not sure everybody knows, but Elementium comes in like various colours. It's not just like this black material, which can come in red, blue, it can come in the colours of the elements. It's just making me wonder if Azerite's similar in that regard, and it's been Azerite used by different creatures throughout Azeroth's history. They just haven't known it because it didn't look like
it. Yeah, that is I feel like that entire thing is really complicated, and I personally can't begin to understand it yet, but there's definitely something really substantial about the way the universe works with regards to crystals and the way the elements are connected to crystals and minerals and things like that. There's definitely something going on. I feel like it might be a synthesis of the elements with the arcane or the elements with the fel that makes the crystal, but it's so, or even like, I don't know, the elements in the light or the elements in the void makes a crystal. I don't know, but we know so little about it at this point.
True. Thinking about it, why? I feel like there's something, because I've done research into this specific subject, because I was looking into Apexis crystals, which in my opinion are pretty much the equivalent of Azerite Draenor, but you know, different story. And for some reason I was looking into like, yeah, specifically what they were made out of, because yeah, as you mentioned, the idea is like, well, what element are crystals made out of, right? So they should assumedly be made out of some type of element, and assumedly they have magic attached to it. And the conclusion I came to was that it was some form of earth, or it was more like, how do I put it? Magic has different states. Like, you know how, like, I guess, how do I put it? Normal state we see magic in is like, I guess like a plasma form, like energy, right? Like arcane energy, fel energy, you know, all that type of stuff. However, it doesn't necessarily have to be in that form, as in like the solid form of magic might be crystals. I think that was a possibility.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'll agree with that. There's also like different types of cores and minerals and things like that. Like they're not always seen as crystals, but it's some kind of like solid battery of magic kind of thing. But Azerite specifically, how you see like Azerite elementals and how it's affecting the elements just makes me feel like because for the magic to become matter, like that's basically what it is. Like magic is something that is always like it's not transient. It's like supernatural. It's invisible. It's like it's flying all over the place. It's not something you can just distill into like a physical thing. For you to be able to hold the core of like arcane, I feel like the elements need to play a role there because all matter is made up of the elements.
No, you're right, I definitely agree. And thinking about it, knowing our luck, it probably has something to do with spirit and decay, which, you know, have such little explanation in regards to everything, it's not funny.
Yeah. I think spirit and decay probably has a lot to do with arcane and fel. I think that you know, the same way everything we have in the physical universe is made up of matter from the 5 elements, I think everything in the ethereal plane is probably made up of spirit and decay.
Actually, now you mentioned that, it actually makes a lot of sense. I guess I just throw this concept out there as well. It's like, just to kind of like bring it back to like the explanation behind the elemental plane and possibly, well, Helheim, Skywall and all that stuff. Is it possible that, well, these pocket dimensions in regards to like, yeah, Halls of Valor specifically and Helheim, is that they're in kind of a mix of two, or like a magic and a specific element? So with like Halls of Valor, okay, it's like a pocket dimension that specifically relates to the light and air, while as Helheim is a place that specifically relates to death and water. And like there are other places out there that kind of like ultra-specific realms. And I mean, if you're thinking about it even further, when it comes to like, I guess, the other side, right? It's possible that there are just pocket dimensions out there that don't have physical matter in the middle. Like literally just realms of spirits. That's a possibility?
So I agree what you said about Helheim and Skyhold. I mean, it makes me wonder about the dream. If the dream doesn't seem to have fire. Like it seems like in terms of, it almost seems like Earth. Like there might be a bit of water going on, but only to the extent, like I don't even know if there is water.
No, you're right, and that's a good point as well, because yeah, the dream would probably be something very similar. And just, would it be a plane of life, or
I mean, Freya and Aenar are the ones who helped craft it, so it makes a lot of sense why it would be Earth, I think. But it is weird, like, and then that makes me think of the dragon shrines that are also the same type of thing, where it's kind of like an element for the dragon.
True. Oh, very true, actually. Like, the thing about the Emerald Dream, right, though, is that looking at it, you got the Emerald Dream, but then you've got Maragon, right, which is another one of these places, which I assume is like partial pocket dimension. And we know for a fact that place is specifically Earth and nature, because of the romance between, I think it was Zatia and I still can't remember that princess's name. But yeah, those two, and what they got out of there was rather interesting, because you have what? Giants, killer plants, crocodiles, and hydras. We don't see any hydras in the Emerald Dream.
Yeah.
Then again, that could be one of the things that the Titans took out.
Well, I'm honestly trying to think of like water in the dream. Is there water anywhere?
That's a good question.
It'd be really interesting if there wasn't.
Okay, I think there's like some partial water. However, I think that was near the Nightmare section of the Dreamway. Because in the Dreamway, there's like this one section that's like shut off to Nightmare, I think, or at least there was a quest that related to that area, and it had a specific area that had a bit of water in it. However, considering that specifically seemed to relate to Nazjatar, it kind of makes sense why there was water there. But other than that, yeah.
Oh, you mean, what the heck? The Druid place. What the heck is it called?
Yeah. You know what place I'm talking about.
Moonglade. Yeah, Moonglade is a big lake.
Yep.
That's what you're talking about, right? And then that's how you go in the Rift of Alm. Huh, interesting. Because N'Zoth has always been really relevant to the Abyssal Maw for some reason. It's interesting how the one place in the dream where you go down to the Rift of Alm, it's like, it's the lake.
Oh
my god. I feel like we're so off topic. I'm sorry.
True. That said, though, half the fun of this is literally going on tangents, or at least I figure half the fun of this is going off on tangents and just talking about the lore in general. But I guess to kind of come back to topic, we've kind of gone over what they are and why they are important. But I guess we should kind of go on to the where. Because admittedly, like, I've really really tried to look into the where of these, and I would like to talk about that, but then again, maybe you don't want to, so we'll see, but we'll probably go into the where. So what do you think in regards to where do you think ley lines have turned up before? Because, yeah.
That's tricky. It seems like whenever we have a rift in the fabric of reality, ley lines come up.
Okay.
With Outland, with the Dark Portal, with like the Kill Jaden thing you explained with the Illidan's Keystone to Argus, the Well of Eternity, Karazhan. And portals in general, of course, because I mean that's the same. Any type of rift in the fabric.
Well, now you mention that kind of, well, how do I put it? Kind of explains what's about to like turn up on the screen for those who are watching, but it's like, how do I put it? Yeah, they turn up everywhere, and ironically enough, because I don't have a life, I've ended up putting together, well, 2 maps. One map is basically, how do I put it, the latitudes of Azeroth, which has the assumed, well, I think they're where ley lines occur across the latitudes, and I could go through the map specifically. However, if you know your lore, I almost guarantee you'll figure out where most of these places are and be like, oh, that's kind of surprising. And for the other map, that's kind of like a assumption of where certain places were in regards to Pangea Azeroth before the Sundering happened. I mean, the black spots are like definite spots, and they were like on other maps show where they are. However, when it comes to the white spots, it's kind of like general assumptions and whatnot. But yeah, now that when you mention like where they've turned up in regards to, yeah, just places that how do I put it, don't make sense, and also like rifts and whatnot. Do you think in 8.2 we're going to be going to a ley line, specifically the Azara's powers and Nazjatar in general, but specifically the Eternal Powers?
I kind of wonder if that's in the Abyssal Maw.
I wonder that as well, but because I'll just draw people's attention to, I guess, the green line going across the Grim Batol, because that's Nazjatar apparently sits literally right next to the Maelstrom, and spoilers ahead, minor-ish spoilers ahead. If the broadcast text is correct, then the Eternal Powers literally sits under the Maelstrom, and somehow Azara is using it to protect the palace. Hence why we apparently need the Javelins of Suramar to get in. Or at least we need to get rid of the Tired Stone, or we need both. But anyway, interesting thing is that, you know how, well, with Azara's Palace it just seems unnaturally dark, but on top of that we actually, well, she's apparently trying to free N'Zoth, right? Just makes me wonder if, that the Eternal Palace itself, and hence why it's called the Eternal Palace, it kind of sits within like a minorish pocket dimension, with like that's literally just adjoined to N'Zoth's prison. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I definitely could see it in a pocket dimension. I think it would be the Abyssal Maw.
Okay. Because yeah, the reason why I'm just bringing this up is because technically N'Zoth's prison was never under the Maelstrom. Like, never. And there's, how do I put it, I would be genuinely shocked if the continental shifting of the Sundering moved N'Zoth's prison directly under the Maelstrom. So it's just making me wonder if the Eternal Palace and like the whole situation there is, it's kind of like a side door in, and it's kind of how Azara's been trying to free N'Zoth to begin with. And it's possibly what the Old Gods were trying to do with the Sundering and the Well of Eternity to begin with, because obviously the ley lines would have been ruptured there, like quite thoroughly ruptured there and possibly set them free, but I digress.
Yeah. I don't 100% buy the idea that N'Zoth is there in Nazjatar under the Maelstrom, anywhere near there. I'm not 100% convinced about that. But if he did somehow, if we could somehow get to N'Zoth through there, like the Circle of Stars or whatever, I think it would be the Rift of All.
Well, this is the interesting thing, right? Because with the Rift of Uln, right, I think that's how do I put it? From everything I've described, I don't think I've stated that there's any type of rule that says within a pocket dimension you can't create another exit, right? Or at least I hope I haven't, right? So the idea is, I think the Rift of Uln led to N'Zoth's prison, and for whatever reason, we kind of knocked him out of there. But obviously the Rift and the the Heart of the Void, it's called Heart of the Void, that was planted there, right? And that's like one exit he has, right? Then you've got the Maelstrom and the Eternal Palace. However, as you said, it's not likely that he's there, as in it's likely he's somewhere else, and it would be interesting if there was another exit he kind of had to unlock before he got out.
I don't think his prison had anything to do with the Rift of All.
Huh?
I don't think the Titans are that dumb. I just think that N'Zoth's entire plan concerning the dream, because like if you read the War of the Ancients trilogy, which I have not read cover to cover, but I just from skimming and from what I do know of it, like it seems like the entire plot of N'Zoth with regards to Sargeras, Azara, Xavius, the War of the Ancients, like all of that, the dream, what he's doing with Ysera now, like all of that is still ongoing. It's basically to get access to the Rift of All. Like I think his way of getting out, if I had to guess, the way I see it is, from what we know, both the nightmare and the dream stem from the Rift of All. That is something we learned from Malfurion and Cenarius in the book. Like, the dream and the nightmare are growing out of the Rift of All. Like, that's where it originates from. And so you can access the Rift of All from the dream. So I think N'Zoth is reverse engineering it to where his machinations on Azeroth, he was able to control the people on Azeroth, minions like Archdruid, Fandral, Staghelm, to get access to these world trees, to get access to the dream, just like Yogg-Saron did with Andrasil. So he's gotten his way in from reality to the dream, and then from the dream, he's gotten access to the Rift of All. And the Rift of All, as we know, it not only connects the dream, but it connects the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark. And for all we know, it could connect the Shadowlands. It seems to be the crossroads of everything. I think that's the point of it. And so he's managed to connect reality to the dream, to the Rift of All. I would imagine from the Rift of All, he can connect to his prison, wherever his prison may be. I don't know, maybe he has to go through the Abyssal Maw first to get to there, which might be where Azara is doing. I don't know, but I don't think the Rift of All directly connects to his prison. I think he's just like you said, he's opening the doors. He's trying to link up the chains to where he can get out. And I think he would have to go through the Rift of All, through the dream, through to reality to get out. That's the path he's forging.
Okay. Going with that theory, now that you mentioned that, it just kinda, you know how there used to always be those what was it? I think the pentagram symbols that turn up. That used to turn up in regards to here where the prisons of the old gods are and whatnot. It's funny, interesting that if you go with Moonglade, the Sunwell, Karazhan, and where the sword got stuck, Silithus, you have 4 of those points. The last point you're missing is either Ice Crown / that kind of area, probably, and or Pandaria. I mean, admittedly, the Sunwell's a bit far north when you actually look at the proper maps, but I guess just what I'm getting at is like these places all okay. When it comes to the Sunwell, we know that's related to Ley Lines. When it comes to Karazhan, we know that's related to Ley Lines. Moonglade, most likely related to Ley Lines. Actually, hence, Rift of the Hall actually being there. And then you got the Symbiosis, which, well, how would I put it? Do you think that Sargeras may have stuck his sword into a Ley Line, considering it's one of those weapons, hence why Azeroth's actually bleeding? Hence why the plant didn't crack as well. But yeah.
It's possible. I don't really see the ley lines like that. Like, I think the ley lines are like a microfibrous structure. Like, I don't think they're... I don't know how to explain. I don't think you can hit Azeroth and not hit a ley line. Like, I don't think you can hit in between ley lines. You're always going to be on a ley line. Like, that's the way that I'm looking at it. But we don't really know that.
I guess the question is, would you say that certain ley lines have more significance than others? Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, like, there are significant... Then the significant points that kind of semi-make up this pentagram have also kind of been relatively important in general. But yeah, and the idea would be that N'Zoth is, well, somehow just poking holes in each kind of area, trying to weaken the prison in general so you can just escape.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, for the rips in the fabric of reality, the damage he's doing to it, it makes sense that he'd want to do that in sites of strong ley lines. That makes sense to me.
I guess coming back to where, and how do I put it? You know how, Island Expeditions, the Grim Patrol kind of became important again, right? Because it turns out like a whole bunch of Twilight Drakes are appearing again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, looking at like the latitudes, I found it rather interesting that Nazjatar, where Dalaran ended up during Legion. And actually, that's just like a different subject altogether. The Shrine of Storms kind of and the Grim Patrol all sit along the same latitude, kind of ironically enough. I just find it rather interesting that once again it's like this all sits like literally where Nazjatar apparently is supposed to be.
So, not to like dismantle the theory or anything, but
no, go ahead. Like if you dismantle it. It's always how to put it. It's always more fun to have someone disagree with you and like try and sort out the mess afterwards than just everyone say yes sir, whatever. Sorry, keep going.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, we don't know. But ley lines don't necessarily wrap around the planet like rings or like latitudes. Especially when you look at that compass that's on the map itself, to just below, like Kultiris. That image that we see everywhere. It's like a sun radiating rays off of the planet. Like, that's how I view ley lines. Like, if you had... I don't know. Like, the fact that the Sunwell or Karazhan is a site where a lot of ley lines are intersecting and that there's like tons of ley line stuff going on there, I kind of see that as like a cluster of rays coming out. And like a big, and it makes a big ray. Like, it makes a big, I don't know, a big road. But I don't really understand how the ley lines would work, like, structurally, if they were a thing that wrapped around the planets, like, spherically. Like, I don't really, like, rings. I don't see it that way. But I don't have any, like, we have no information on this at all. So you can basically make of it what you will. I'm just not, like, maybe you can help me to understand why they would wrap around the planet.
The why, I would be completely lost on. I would be completely honest with that. The why, however, I guess the reason why I think it has some merit, as in why it's possibly something, is because when I was doing this, I genuinely thought I was being paranoid. Because the first line I kind of noticed was that, like, the area, so it's a big area, but, like, let's just go for, like, the bottom line. Like, Zul'Gurub, Caverns of Time, and pretty much, well, the harbour, or Zazaralor in general, right? They're all aligned, right? And I was like, okay, yeah, right, like, that's a thing. But then, like, when you look at where, like, Karazhan is, and if you, like, kind of spread that line open a bit more, you can kind of say, Sunken Temple, Karazhan, the the volcano in Duskwood, the cyclone that turns up in Westfall. Where else does it align with? Oh yeah, the Necropolis, like Bonsamdi's Necropolis, Zul'Farrak, which is like kind of put it. There is definitely a Titan facility there. Like there are too many hints to say there's a Titan facility there, but like Zul'Farrak. And yeah, that was it for that line. They all aligned, and I was like, this is like a good joke. However, as I kind of went up further, there's more places that align, or that just sit just off certain places. And the reason why I found it rather shocking in regards to all these was that all of these places, in some way, shape, or form, kind of relate to ley lines, or it can be explained why they relate to ley lines. And the thing was, though, right, it's like, the minute I did this, I was like, okay, maybe there's something in the longitudes, maybe there's like another pattern that's on the map that I'm just not seeing. However, I couldn't find anything, which I found rather odd. I mean, like, for example, right, one that I really, really didn't expect was the one in Karazhan, because the one that goes across Karazhan, right, connects to Vashir, so the portal to the Abyssal Maw, like the plane of water, right? Then you've got Blackrock Mountain that just sits off that, and the Alderman facility, which sits just off that, or Badlands Alderman facility, where that just sits off. And then, like, on the Kalimdor side, you have the Dire Maul, which was like major Ajaran city, right? As in, oh god, what were their names? Chandrila? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Chandrila sit there, but then you also have Maradon, right? And as I said, like, the initial thing that got me off this whole thing was like Maradon, Caverns of Time, and Karazhan, and where I kind of connected the whole idea of, okay, these places are the way they are because they relate to ley lines. What I was really shocked at, though, was like, oh, these three places also have these alignments along post-sundered Azeroth. And it's like, okay. And it's like, let's take a, and it's like, sorry, I'm going on. But basically, yeah, it's more like all of these lines align surprisingly important places, all of which have relatively distinct but explainable reasons for why they are related to ley lines. And I mean, the reason why Karazhan shocked me as well was because it kind of related Azerite to ley lines, because, okay, Galliux was digging deep and he somehow found Azerite, right? So the question is, what if he unknowingly just dug deep enough that he's found whatever constituted Azeroth's heart, right? And then, well, you know, Cataclysm happened, volcano goes off, etc., except, you know, after the sword stabbed in and Azeroth starts bleeding, because I honestly think she's bleeding through the ley lines. The reason why so much Azerite turned up on Karazhan was because there's you know, of that like hole Galliux left in the ley lines, or kind of like that. But yeah, anyway, main point, to avoid the rambling, I'm sorry. The alignments I found here were a complete coincidence. However, the more I looked at them, and like I'm not trying to justify it by just looking at them, the more they kind of just appeared, the more important locations started to line up across these places. And the only thing I could think of was ley lines, specifically for these. I went on way too long. I am so sorry.
No, I get what you're saying, and you're definitely not wrong that to look at things this way. Like, you know what ley lines actually are like in real life, right?
There's supposed, if I'm not mistaken, there's supposed to be places that have important magical influence. No?
Well, basically, like archaeologists, when they coined the term, from my understanding, the whole point of this type of like anthropology was to try and understand why certain important like spiritual sites and magical sites were placed on the earth in the positions they were. And they were trying to map it out and to see like where things lined up to try and see if there was any rhyme or reason, or if they could identify any patterns to see like where, like if there was a true magical significance to the area that could be explained, like if there was an actual geographical, like scientifical, that's a word, like reasoning, if there was any reasoning behind the different cultures having these different important temples and very powerful places in the certain areas, which is like exactly what you're doing. And when WoW named those things ley lines, like they named it after that. Like it's not a random name. Like there's a reason. So I think WoW, like Blizzard is basically trying to say the concept of ley lines that's never been proven in real life, that didn't lead anywhere. Like they're trying to say in WoW it is a thing, and that these sites didn't just spring up randomly. They sprung up there because that was a very significant, powerful area. But the mystery is like how, like what the ley lines are, like the pattern itself that we know for a fact it probably is there. There probably is some pattern that Blizzard's going off, but it's like deciphering what the pattern is. And I just don't think that it would just be some straight lines across the world, because that kind of goes against the whole mystery of the whole archaeological aspect to it. Like there's also the fact that in Legion, when I think it was I'm not sure which Nightborn, but one of the Nightborn like ley line surveyor ladies is helping that blue dragon to like fix the ley lines in a certain cave so they don't explode. And if she's like, yeah, that's who I thought it was. And if they're slightly off, then they'll cause it to rupture. And the Nightborn is like so high and mighty, like she thinks she knows so much about ley lines, and she thinks like that she doesn't need the dragon's help, and she'll do it just fine. But then the dragon is like, dude, I can actually see the ley lines, and you're like slightly off, so don't do it there. And she like repositions it, and the Nightborn lady is like, holy crap. Like, you can just see the ley lines. Like, so I don't think, like, based on that, it sounds like more of a web or more of an intricate thing. Like, it doesn't seem like, I mean, if they were just on one massive ley line, she wouldn't be able to slightly reposition her thing and for it to make such a massive difference. You know what I'm saying?
I guess then instead of these being, I guess, how do I put it? The only ley lines on Azeroth, would I be more accurate to say that they're the important ley lines on Azeroth, or they seem to be major ley lines?
Either that, or maybe like there's some kind of convergence going on there. Like if you picture it like veins or capillaries in a being, if you go into the dream and the Emerald Dream or the Nightmare, and you see all these like little electrical like fibers and whatnot, that's kind of how I see the ley lines potentially. And if you're looking at it that way, maybe it's just like it's more dense across that meridian. Like maybe there's, do you know what I'm trying to say?
No, I do get what you're trying to say.
Like generally what you're doing is really good. I just think that there might be more depth to it, that like Blizzard might have made it more complex.
No, I would agree with that. And first statement is just to like reiterate on something you mentioned, or like something you remind me of actually. What was it? Beginner's Guide to Dimensional Rifting. Again, I really like this book. If you can't tell, it's like it's really informative. it mentions the idea that most sacred places to the beings of Azeroth relate to ley lines, as in these, as the line is something along the lines of that for whatever reason, the citizens of Azeroth are drawn to ley lines and build, mighty structures, whatnot, and it kind of just leaves a tidbit of a warning. It's like, so if you kind of want to go like studying them, beware, because you might actually be stepping on someone's sacred site. And I mean, the best example of this is probably between the Blood Elves and the Unmighty Trolls. Blood Elves found a ley line. It was actually, sacred burial site for the Unmighty Trolls, and war broke out, etc., etc. But I guess the first thing is there a whisper about rings, out of curiosity? I'm trying to remember if there is or if there isn't.
Rings?
Yeah, rings.
Well, it's not a whisper, but one of Il'gyon's quotes, I think it might not even be like one of his in-fight whispers. I think it was when he was talking to Malfurion potentially, but he says, your destiny was foretold in the rings, or something like that. So, like, this was foretold in the rings.
Okay. Well, I guess just when you made me start thinking about like why, that was one idea that came to mind. But I guess just going off this ring map, for example, because as I said, I've just found this to be like the really, really interesting coincidence that may have some major significance, or may just be, the ramblings of a mad duck. But anyway, the other map that's like either being shown now or has been up for a while, right? That one, I think, well, gives a more credible explanation for the why certain places are important. And the reason is that something that you'll notice when looking at this map is that, at the very least when it comes to the black spots, right, they're all very, very close to the borders, and or just sitting on the borders of where the old gods occupied, right? As in, like, old Pangaea Azeroth, when the old gods reigned and the Black Empire was strong, most of the places that we've been to just happen to have been close to the borders, right? And what's kind of scary is that, okay, the white spots are guesses, but I feel like they're relatively accurate if the, continental shifts weren't too crazy. But if if these white spots were relatively accurate, what's kind of scary is that most of the landmass that we are currently sitting on, like post-Sundered Azeroth, what is Kalimdor, Eastern Kingdoms, Pandaria, and Northern, right? What's left is mostly the borders of where these old gods were fighting. As in, like, well, yeah. I guess the best example is Pandaria, like Throne of Thunder, Motion Vaults, Vale of Eternal Blossoms. All of that would have been the border of Seathun and Yasharaj. And thanks to the, what was it? It was Xalatath. Yeah, it was Xalatath actually, who mentioned the idea that Suramar, which also sits on the borders, was the place of a great battle between the old gods. What was it, Balcatanth? Yeah, Balcatanth. It kind of just implies that it's like, okay, so Suramar was important to the old gods, so much so that they're fighting over it. The map reinforces this, and if we go on the reason why Suramar is just so important to the Night Elves and everything in general, it's because of ley lines. Like, quite specifically, Suramar is known for just having ley lines everywhere. So when it comes to the old god map and the places that are close to the borders, for me at the very least it kind of implies that the why is that these places are important because of the ley lines, and it's because the old gods were fighting over them that they are still around. Jeez, I hope that made sense.
What I find the most fascinating about your map, of the Black Empire Azeroth and where all of these sacred sites are, is that they tend to be on the borders of World God territory. Like, all of them. And you can pretty much, you can draw some lines here. Like, if you connect the Sunwell to Kultiris, like that's one big line. If you connect Vashir to, Sunken Temple, this little Dark Portal area, or if you connect Zilfarak to Timeless Isle, like, you can draw some lines, but the lines tend to match up with the borders of the old gods' territories. I almost wonder if that has anything to do with why they're places of power, especially like how you mentioned with the Battle of Catan. Like, Zaltas says that area is incredibly, it's always been incredible site of power, but like I feel like part of the reason might be because it's been a site of so many battles, and that like apparently the old gods were fighting over that place. Like, what if, I don't know if the old gods influenced where the ley lines are. They might have influenced which ley lines got big and strong and fueled. Like, what if the ley lines that ran across their borders where they were fighting constantly and there's people constantly dying there, what if those ley lines are just the ones that got really powered up?
Oh, now that you mention that actually just reminded me of something, because, okay, so, this is kind of going off topic, but trust me, it will come back to it. So the question is, when it comes to the Dark Portal, right, what do you think powered it? Like, how do you think... wrong question. Do you think Medivh and Gul'dan, when they created the Dark Portal, do you think they created a ley line, or do you think they just opened a ley line? As in, like, they opened a portal within a ley line, or do you think they actually made a ley line and then opened a portal? Or did that, like, simultaneously?
It's hard to say. It could be either one, because Gul'dan had to sacrifice a ton of souls to do that.
And this is where I was like going with it, right? Because if we go on the assumption that they actually created a ley line, right, then the implication there is, right, that, well, the magics they used, right, they used Fel, or chaos magic, right, which, depending on which piece of lore you look at, describes Fel as being like a mix of all magics, right? But then you've got Arcane on Medivh's side, which is described as being the same thing, as in it's described as being an amalgamation of multiple magics, depending on what source you look at. And so you got those two magics, which were used simultaneously with, the souls of a lot of Draenei, or one single Draenei child, depending on the lore, but they used those to create a ley line to begin with, or like create a connection between Azeroth and Draenor that has never been broken. So, coming back to what you're saying, and the idea that like people were dying on these places, makes you wonder if that was like the point, as in kill these people on top of ley lines so that they become stronger in some way, shape, or form, or start to expand.
Yeah, because I wonder if the ley lines are, in some respect, how, like, where the souls go to or something, like when people die, if their energy, the way that it's transported, like through veins kind of thing, if that's kind of one of the functions of the ley lines. It would explain how, in order for people to tap into the ley lines, why in some regards you have these like sacrifices happening, because the ley lines would need to accept those Draenei souls.
Okay. As in, you think like souls travel through the ley lines to possibly get to their afterlives?
Potentially.
Okay. That would make a lot of sense, and could possibly explain what happened to Vol'jin. Possibly.
Well, in Stranglethorn Vale, and we're making a video on this eventually, but in Classic WoW, there's these blue crystals all over Stranglethorn Vale, and it TLDR, from doing some studying of the quests, it gives you the impression that the souls of the trolls who die in Stranglethorn Vale, and probably everywhere, stay in the body until night. And when it's nighttime, when the moon comes out, that's when the soul leaves the body, and it'll either, it can get sucked up if there's like a crystal or a Naru or something nearby, it'll get drawn into that. If there's nothing to like impede the travel of the soul, that like, it's not going up to the stars or it's not doing anything weird, then it'll, like, I would imagine it goes to the ley lines and makes its way to the planet. But I think that only happens at night when the moon is up, which is an interesting thing.
Oh, that's really interesting. Because, Which level was it? It's Greek. Greek's, oh yeah, the bat. Prior to him being corrupted by Hakar, his whole premise was guiding the souls of the dead, or like, yeah, he guided the souls of the dead so they wouldn't get lost at night. Which is kind of ironic considering how bats generally function. As in, blind can generally see in the dark through echolocation, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no. I have kept you for way too long. I mean, we started, 3 hours ago now?
2 hours
No, 2.
ago.
2.
Yeah, I was just saying 2 hours ago. Well, if that's, pretty much what you wanted to talk about, I mean, we can always talk another time if there was other points you wanted to.
Oh no, I enjoy talking about this. It's just, yeah, I feel like I've kept you for just a bit too long, and unfortunately life is life, and I've probably kept the house a bit too quiet for a bit too long. But do you want to continue this topic another day, or just another topic in general another day?
Yeah, sounds good. Or if you had more to say about ley lines, we can definitely continue it, or we can talk about something different. That's cool.
We might end up talking more about ley lines. I mean, I think we've generally covered everything. I mean, the only thing I can kind of add to this topic is the specific locations and how they all quite specifically relate to ley lines and the possibilities there. But yeah, I mean, okay, we might actually end up talking about them because there are a lot of implications surrounding this. But thank you for coming on. Yeah. Sorry for keeping you as well.
No problem, Edge. Thanks for having me. No, it was fun. Can't even tell the time's passing because it's just like sitting in Discord just talking. It's all good.
So, until next time, see you around.